Hey guys, welcome back to The Readers. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is a pro-revenge story. My former boss is the worst human being I've ever met. He did all sorts of things to mess with anyone he didn't like, taking pleasure in making their lives miserable at every opportunity. Last summer, I was at a family reunion in Memorial Park walking with my young cousin who has Down syndrome, Tommy. Tommy manages well most of the time, but he's always been sensitive about people commenting on his appearance or his condition. We were having a great time on our walk, enjoying the warm July afternoon and watching the ducks in the nearby pond. Then I spot my boss walking toward us. I'll call him Mark. My stomach drops at seeing him, but I force a smile and nod hello to keep things civil. Mark stops and sneers. "Well, look what we have here. Two ugly morons out for a walk." Tommy immediately starts crying, his ice cream cone dropping to the ground as Mark walks away laughing. I kneel down next to Tommy, trying to comfort him while silently fuming at Mark. "Hey, buddy, don't listen to that mean man," I say, giving Tommy a hug. "Remember what we always say about bullies?" Tommy sniffles. "They're just jealous of how awesome we are." "That's right," I reply. "And you know what else? You've got so many people who love you. That guy, he's just a stranger who doesn't matter." After getting Tommy calmed down and buying him a new ice cream cone, we continued our walk. That's when I noticed Mark was at the park with his wife and teenage daughter, having some kind of birthday celebration. He had apparently been returning from the restrooms when he encountered us. Furious, I went back to our family gathering and told my cousin Derek what happened. Derek wanted immediate payback, but I reminded him that Mark was my boss and could make my work life even more hellish if he suspected I was involved, so Derek asked what information I had that might be useful. I shared several details about Mark, but the important parts were his drinking habits and family life. Mark frequently bragged about spending Friday nights at the Rusty Nail, drinking their craft IPAs while his wife and daughter visited relatives. He'd also recently mentioned his wife's obsession with baby Grogu memorabilia, specifically the plush doll she kept on their bed. I stayed away from the revenge scene, but Derek gave me the full report afterward. Derek approached Mark, throwing an arm around his shoulders and attempting to kiss his cheek. Mark shoved him away forcefully. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" Mark shouted. His wife and daughter turned to watch the commotion. Derek smiled sweetly. "Baby, I've missed you so much. Last Friday was incredible." "What are you talking about?" Mark demanded, his face reddening. "Oh, come on, sweetie," Derek cooed. "After all those IPAs at the Rusty Nail, you were so passionate." Mark's wife stood up from their picnic blanket. "Excuse me? This guy's crazy," Mark protested. "I've never seen him before in my life." Derek clutched his chest dramatically. "You don't remember? But you were screaming my name all night." Mark's daughter watched wide-eyed as her father exploded. "You lying piece of—" "Mark!" his wife interrupted. "Sir, I think you must be confused. This is my husband." Derek shook his head sadly. "No confusion here. We had the most amazing night together. Then we went back to his place on Maple Drive and made love right next to that cute little baby Grogu doll on the bed." Mark's wife gasped, her face going pale. Derek walked away, calling over his shoulder. "Sorry for the mix-up, unless it wasn't." The fallout was spectacular. Mark's marriage had already been struggling, and this incident pushed his wife over the edge. She filed for divorce within weeks. For months afterward, Mark would complain at work about missing his daughter and hating his cramped apartment. Every time he whined about his ruined family life, I remembered Tommy's tears and felt zero sympathy. The sweetest part was that Mark never suspected I had anything to do with his downfall. The next one is an entitled People's Story. My Aunt Martha's farm was my favorite place in the world growing up. Every summer from age 8 onwards, I'd spend weeks there helping her tend to the chickens, collect eggs, and harvest vegetables from her impressive garden. The 15-acre property had been in our family for 3 generations, tucked away in a quiet corner of rural Virginia. While development had slowly crept closer over the decades, Martha's farm remained an oasis of peace and tradition. When Aunt Martha passed away suddenly from a heart attack last year, I was devastated. I was 23 at the time and had just finished college with my degree in agricultural science. Martha had no children of her own, and to everyone's surprise, she'd left the entire farm to me in her will. She knew how much I loved that place and trusted me to keep it going. The farm was located within the boundaries of the Oak Ridge Estates Homeowner Association, which had been established about 15 years ago when some fancy subdivisions started going up nearby. Martha had fought tooth and nail against joining initially, but ultimately didn't have a choice since her property was completely surrounded by homeowner association territory. She'd gotten herself grandfathered in with special agricultural zoning and permissions to keep her farming operations going. The first sign of trouble came about 2 weeks after the will was read. I received a certified letter from the Homeowner Association Board stating that they had serious concerns about my ability to maintain and operate the property in accordance with community standards. They requested a meeting to discuss the situation. I showed up to the meeting ready to defend my right to inherit my aunt's farm. The Homeowner Association Board consisted of 5 people, all at least 30 years older than me. Karen Matthews, the board president, peered at me over her reading glasses with obvious disdain. "Mr. Thompson," she began, shuffling some papers importantly, "while we sympathize with your loss, we have significant reservations about someone of your limited life experience taking over such a large agricultural operation within our community." "With all due respect, Mrs. Matthews," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "I have a degree in agricultural science, and I've been helping my aunt run this farm every summer for the past 15 years. I'm perfectly capable of maintaining it properly." "Perhaps," said Tom Wheeler, the vice president, "but there are liability issues to consider. What if your livestock gets loose? What about proper insurance coverage? The smell and noise impact on neighboring properties? These are serious concerns." "All of which I've already addressed," I countered. "I've maintained all the same insurance policies my aunt had in place. The property lines are properly fenced, and I intend to continue operating exactly as she did, which was never a problem before." "Nevertheless," Karen cut in, "the board feels that having such a young, inexperienced owner represents an unacceptable risk to property values and community standards. We'll need to review this situation carefully." I left that meeting with a bad feeling in my stomach. Over the next few weeks, I threw myself into getting the farm running smoothly. I had quit my entry-level job at an agricultural supply company to focus on this full-time. The spring planting season was approaching and there was lots to do. Then one morning in early March, I arrived at the farm to find several large sold future site of Oak Ridge Commons signs posted along the road frontage. My heart nearly stopped. I immediately called the real estate company listed on the signs. "Oh yes," said the cheerful agent. "We're handling the sale of that parcel to Riverside Development Group. They're planning to build 45 luxury townhomes. The Homeowner Association Board just accepted their offer last week." "That's impossible," I sputtered. "I own this property. It was left to me in my aunt's will. No one has authority to sell it." There was an awkward pause. "Sir, according to our documentation, the Oak Ridge Estates Homeowner Association has legal title to the property. They've provided all the necessary paperwork showing their authority to sell. Perhaps you should speak with them directly about this." I hung up and immediately called my aunt's lawyer, Michael Chen. He was as shocked as I was and promised to look into it right away. Within an hour, he called back with disturbing news. "They filed some kind of emergency motion with the county claiming you had abandoned the property," he explained. "They provided documentation showing multiple violations of homeowner association regulations and claimed you were an unfit owner. Since you weren't properly served notice of the hearing, it proceeded without you and they were granted temporary title pending final resolution." "How is that even legal?" I demanded. "They can't just steal my property." "It's not legal at all," Michael assured me. "This is a clear violation of your property rights and due process. I'm filing for an immediate injunction to stop the sale, but we need to move fast before they try to close the deal." What followed was 2 months of intense legal battles. We discovered that the Homeowner Association Board had been secretly negotiating with developers for months, even before my aunt passed away. They had deliberately engineered this situation, manufacturing bogus violations and manipulating the process to try to force a quick sale before I could effectively fight back. Digging deeper, Michael uncovered a shocking web of corruption. Karen Matthews, the Homeowner Association president, was married to one of the partners at Riverside Development Group. Tom Wheeler, the vice president, owned a real estate investment company that stood to make hefty commissions on the deal. They had been salivating over my aunt's prime farmland for years, just waiting for an opportunity. The violations they cited were completely fabricated. They claimed I had let the property fall into disrepair, but I had photos documenting all the maintenance and improvements I'd made. They said neighbors had complained about noise and odors, but we got signed statements from adjacent property owners saying they had never made any such complaints. The most infuriating part was discovering that they had deliberately sent all official notices to my aunt's old P.O. box, which had been closed after her death, rather than my current address, which they had on file. This let them claim I was unresponsive to their concerns. I wasn't going down without a fight. Michael helped me file a massive lawsuit against the homeowner association board members personally, as well as the homeowner association itself, citing fraud, abuse of power, and violation of property rights. We also reported their actions to the state attorney general's office for investigation. The local media got wind of the story and ran several pieces about the greedy homeowner association trying to steal a family farm from a young heir. The coverage painted me as David fighting Goliath, which helped rally public support. Other homeowner association residents started speaking up about past abuses by the board. One elderly resident, Mrs. Rodriguez, came forward with evidence that the board had tried similar tactics with her property a few years earlier. They kept fining me for ridiculous things until I could barely afford to stay in my home, she told me. They wanted to force me to sell so their developer friends could build more townhouses. I wish I'd fought back like you're doing. The turning point came when we obtained emails between Karen Matthews and her husband discussing their plans. In one particularly damning exchange from 6 months earlier, she wrote, "Once the old lady kicks the bucket, we can easily push out whatever young relative inherits. No judge will take a 23-year-old seriously as a farm owner. We'll have those 15 acres ready for development before anyone knows what hit them." When these emails became public, the other homeowner association board members quickly turned on Karen and Tom, not wanting to go down with the ship. They provided additional evidence of the corruption and admitted to being manipulated into supporting the scheme. The judge hearing our case was furious when she saw the full extent of their deception. She immediately granted our injunction, stopping the sale, and restored full title to me. But we weren't done yet. "Your Honor," Michael argued in court, "this was a calculated conspiracy to defraud my client of his rightful inheritance. The defendants abused their positions of authority and manipulated the legal system for personal profit. We're asking for punitive damages and criminal referrals." The judge agreed. Karen and Tom were both removed from the homeowner association board and referred to prosecutors for potential criminal charges. The homeowner association itself was ordered to pay me $500,000 in damages. Most satisfyingly, the judge permanently stripped the homeowner association of any authority over my property, essentially removing it from their jurisdiction entirely. The defendants' actions show exactly why such autonomy is necessary, the judge wrote in her ruling. They have demonstrated they cannot be trusted to exercise authority over this property in good faith. The aftermath was sweeping. The entire homeowner association board was forced to resign and new elections were held. The new board instituted strict conflict of interest policies and transparency requirements. Karen's husband's development company faced its own investigations and eventually went bankrupt from all the legal troubles. I used part of the settlement money to make improvements to the farm, including a new irrigation system and greenhouse that my aunt had always wanted. The rest went into a legal defense fund to help other small property owners fight against homeowner association abuse. Mrs. Rodriguez became a regular visitor, often bringing her grandchildren to see the chickens and help in the garden. Other neighbors who had been intimidated by the old board started reaching out as well. The farm became something of a community gathering place, just as it had been in my aunt's day. One afternoon, about a year after everything was resolved, I was out fixing a fence when a familiar Mercedes pulled up. It was Karen Matthews, looking much less polished than in her homeowner association board days. She had sold her big house in the subdivision and moved to a condo after her husband left her. "I owe you an apology," she said, not quite meeting my eyes. "What we did was wrong. I got so caught up in the money and power that I forgot this was people's homes and lives we were messing with. Your aunt would be proud of how you fought for this place." I appreciated the apology, but I also hadn't forgotten how they nearly stole my inheritance. "Thank you for saying that," I replied simply. "I hope you've learned that younger doesn't always mean less capable." She nodded and drove away. I went back to mending the fence, stopping occasionally to watch the chickens scratch in the dirt or listen to the wind in the old oak trees. My aunt had trusted me to be a good steward of this land, and I was determined to honor that trust. Today, the farm is thriving. I've started a small CSA program selling vegetables and eggs to local families. The property values in the surrounding subdivision have actually gone up, as people appreciate having a piece of agricultural heritage in their community. Several times a year, I host school groups to teach kids about farming and where their food comes from. Every morning when I wake up and look out over the fields, I think about how close I came to losing it all. But I also think about my Aunt Martha and how she taught me that some things are worth fighting for. The developers and corrupt homeowner association board thought they could easily push around a young heir, but they learned the hard way that age doesn't determine dedication or determination. The best part? The new Homeowner Association Board recently passed a resolution permanently protecting all agricultural and historical properties within their jurisdiction. They even named it the Martha Thompson Heritage Preservation Act. I think my aunt would have liked that. Looking back, I'm grateful for the whole experience, as difficult as it was. It taught me to stand up for what's right, no matter how powerful the opposition. It showed me that one person can make a difference when armed with the truth and the courage to fight for it. Most importantly, it preserved a piece of family history that will hopefully be passed down for generations to come. The farm isn't just land and buildings, it's a legacy of hard work, perseverance, and love for the simple things in life. No corrupt homeowner association board or greedy developer could ever put a price tag on that. The next one is a malicious compliances story. So, for context, I'm currently a head cashier at Home Depot. I work in a higher volume store that remodeled the front end, where our registers are, a couple months ago, where our central checkout is now entirely self-checkout registers, referred to as SCO. While it's SKO, it's known as Assisted SCO, and they want us to be assisting as much as possible. 6 items or more, high price items, and anything that could hide anything inside of it are a must, as well as pushing credit card applications. Now here's where there's been a huge issue. Starting with the cashiers not pushing credit enough, so we fell behind on our goal. So last week, to make up for it, around halfway through the week, my supervisor told us she wanted everyone physically on a register, head cashiers included. They don't even want us checking the schedule to send breaks, or the cashiers home, even though no one is allowed to get overtime. Unless there's money to handle, we aren't allowed off of a register. I bet some of you can understand how frustrating that is. It's literally a SCO. I'm having more people starting to get upset that we're constantly helping them than when we changed it to a SCO and had a ton of people angry. There aren't any normal registers in the main area of the store. 2 to 3 normal registers open total on the opposite ends of the store, and that's it. And me and the other head cashiers weren't complying the entire time about staying on a register 100% of the time because we were going to prioritize at least knowing when to send breaks and our cashiers home, even if it meant us getting into trouble. Well, today was Black Friday, and my supervisor, along with the store manager and a few other managers, were lurking around almost constant. A couple actually helped, which was appreciated, but I digress. The other day I mentioned to my supervisor when she insisted head cashiers had to stay on a register, how we were supposed to send breaks, or how we would direct the line because most people won't walk to an open register even when SCO is empty. She told me to figure it out, and if I have to keep my head on a swivel so I can check customers out and get the line down, then so be it. So I let them run the show. They put me on a register. I complied. I only left when I was told to cover for someone going home, or to use the bathroom. My lunch was 2 hours late. I didn't say anything until an hour and a half after the fact because I rarely get my breaks on time anyways, but my lunch is mandatory because no overtime. My lunch wasn't the only break late though. When I finally got to go on my lunch, one of my cashiers came back from the bathroom and we both saw his 15-minute break was nearly an hour late. I apologized and let him know I hadn't been allowed to check the schedule, or I would have sent him already. I told him to go, but let him know he should double check with our supervisor just in case, since that would mean 2 people would be leaving at once. Then, I come back from my lunch and find out one of our full-time cashiers was forgotten on one of the few normal registers and was actively building overtime. Something if I was physically there for would have never happened as she leaves at the same time every day. Except I was on my lunch. 2 hours late. Then later, I'm sent to garden to cover a lunch over half an hour late. When I got back inside, another cashier calls because his 15 is over half an hour late. Almost 45 minutes. That's just some of what happened. I wasn't allowed to do my job, and therefore, my cashiers were actively being forgotten about because it wasn't important enough. Oh, and we got just as much credit card applications as we did early last week before we were forced to constantly be on registers. It's not about being on a register, it's about asking in general. Something I may not like, but I do because it's my job. Or at least, it was. After seeing how me not doing my job to comply with dumb rules that makes no sense affected my cashiers today, and the fact I got a call back from another job, I put my 2 weeks in, just to seal the deal after a crappy day. But I'm happy. I'm leaving Hell Depot and couldn't be happier. I just worry for my cashiers who are probably going to continue to suffer with these new rules and regulations, and especially if anyone above them actually complies to them 100%. Thank you for watching. I would really appreciate it if you could like the video and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. We'll see you again tomorrow.